Hi everyone, my name is Maddie, welcome back to my channel and welcome to this video where I'm going to be recommending you a whole load of LGBTQ+ books where the covers remind me of pride flags. So just quickly, for anyone wondering why I'm doing this, other than the fact it's fun, is in June I am hosting a readathon called Whateverthon, and one of the prompts on this is read a book where the cover reminds you of a pride flag. And I've had quite a lot of people asking like what kind of books would work for this, do they have any suggestions? So here we go, a whole list of suggestions. I will say I have not read every single one of the books on this list. I've just tried to find books which in some way, shape or form resemble a pride flag. A lot of them are very loose resemblances. It's just very vaguely the colours that are involved. So I won't be able to give a synopsis of every book because I've not read them all, but hopefully I can give you some synopses of most of them, and a lot of them are books I absolutely love. So hopefully some of these LGBT books will work for you for fulfilling this prompt, or if you're not taking part in Whateverthon, here is just a list of LGBT books you might enjoy. I will also say the rep in the book does not necessarily match the flag that it is being associated with, because that was a step too far in being able to find matches. I have, in some of them there will be matches, but a lot of them it's just a case of the cover looks kind of similar, which is the whole point of the prompt. But they are all LGBT and obviously all the pride flags are, so let's just get into it. So starting off with just the most standard one, the most well known, the standard 6-colour pride flag. I have a lot of recs for this one. There are a lot of books which have some form of rainbow on the cover and therefore will match this pride flag. So we are going to start with a book which I've talked about a lot on this channel. It's a book I absolutely love, and that is Camp by Elsie Rosen. As you can see, overall not that rainbow, but does have a rainbow right in the middle, so we're going to count it. This is how tenuous your links can be, it can be anything. But this is an LGBT contemporary story that follows Randy, who goes to an LGBT summer camp every summer and normally takes part in the musical theatre programme, but he has fallen head over heels for another guy at this programme who is very masc presenting and only interested in other guys who present masc. And as a result, he completely changes himself to join the sports groups and make himself very masc and pretends to be someone he isn't. And it's a really interesting story, both about LGBT history, about being gay and dealing with your masculinity and how those two things combine, and also just, it's very queer and it's great fun. Also, I am going to be trying to keep these recs pretty snappy because we have quite a lot of books to get through and I don't want this video being too long. So the second book I'll talk about is The Outrage by William Hussey. This is an LGBTYA dystopian book, and it follows the UK set sort of 50 years in the future, where a dictatorial leader has come in and has reverted all rights that LGBT people have. They are being oppressed, they are sent to concentration camps, they go through chemical castration and basically live their lives as scum if they're ever discovered. And it's a really hard-hitting book. It has a fantastic message and the author has a fantastic afterword after it, kind of really explaining how he is trying to get this message across, and it's really beautiful and a thoroughly good book, though quite hard-hitting, so do go carefully. There are quite a few trigger warnings to the book. The ones that I remember off the top of my head are mention of suicide, self-harm, lots of homophobia just due to the nature of the book, and I think there may be others as well, but just go a little bit carefully because it definitely doesn't hold any punches. Next up, a much happier book is Proud, and this is a collection of stories. It's an anthology. It's some poetry, some stories, there's some illustrations in there as well. I know Alice Oseman did an illustration for it. And it is such a good read. I can't remember many of the stories because I read it a couple of years ago now, but I remember when I read it that a lot of the stories in here were just really, really gorgeous, and I felt really impacted by a lot of them. And there's a huge variety of sexualities and gender identities covered within this book, so definitely a really good one to read, especially if you want something a bit different to your normal fiction. Next is Birthday by Meredith Russo. This is a really interesting story following two teens, I can't remember their names, and they have the same birthday, they were born on the same day, and so we are seeing them, I think, across like 5 or 6 years every year on their birthday. And one of these teens is trans and trying to come to terms with it and trying to come to terms with their feeling for their friend, and there's a lot going on. It's really beautiful, it's really interesting, really hard-hitting, but I would highly recommend it. And as you can see, the little candle on the front has a rainbow on it, and I think the Waterstones edition has rainbow sprayed edges as well. Next up, one of my probably favourite books to this day is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. There are many different covers, but this one specifically very much rainbow, very much pride flag-esque. And this follows, oh my god, what is the main character's name? So this is a YA contemporary story, but with a speculative twist. It follows Aaron Soto, who lives in a world where you can basically like get your memories erased, is something that you can do if you want to. And he's really struggling with lots of things after the, I think, suicide of his dad and repercussions of that. and coming to terms with the fact that he may actually be gay and have feelings for people in a world where he's not sure that's going to be accepted. It's just a really good book. Really, again, very hard-hitting, very sad, but really beautiful, and I had a fantastic time reading it, so I would definitely recommend it. Next up is All the Invisible Things by Orla Collins. This is a really interesting story following a 17-year-old girl whose mother has died, and she has kind of ended up having to take care of her younger sibling, and their dad's kind of checked out a bit, and they've just had to move, and she's moved back to an area where she used to live when she was younger and reconnects with an old best friend, but there's a lot of tension there, and she's coming to terms with her sexuality. She's bisexual, and yeah, it's again quite a sad one, but I really enjoyed it, and it's a really solid YA contemporary that I would definitely recommend, and you may actually see me mention it again later in this video. And then one final one for the kind of rainbow standard pride flag is When You Get the Chance. This is a recent release YA contemporary, which I don't know much about, but I know it includes a group of LGBT friends on a road trip to Pride. Honestly, it sounds like the perfect summary LGBT read. Okay, so moving on, I'm actually going to do two flags together for this next one, which is the Bisexual Flag and the Gender Fluid Flag, simply because they have a very similar colour scheme, and as pretty much all the books that I'm linking to these books are to do with the colour scheme, any of these books would work for either flag, and if you're doing the prompt for Whateverthon, you don't need to say which flag it works for, so this would work for either of these. You can assign it in your head however you would like. But the first book I'm going to be talking about is Hot Dog Girl by Jennifer Duggan. This is a book I've spoken about many times. I absolutely love it. It does actually have a bisexual main character, so fits that flag very well. And this is another YA contemporary. It's quite good fun, and it follows this girl who like isn't really as cool as she wants to be. She works at the summer carnival, and she is the hot dog, literally in the hot dog costume. But she is in love with the guy who plays like the diving pirate prince or whatever it is, and she wants to get his attention, so dates her female best friend in order to get his attention and make him jealous. But maybe she is, you know, potentially not so straight. It's just a really fun read. It really delves into the fact of like people not necessarily acting well or being good people. Like our main character in this basically uses her friend, but that's very much addressed, and it's just a really interesting read, and I love seeing characters be kind of shitty people. Next up, I would recommend The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This is another fantastic YA story, though this is a kind of superhero-esque story. It's set in New York where there are superheroes, and we're following our main character who is utterly obsessed with one of these superheroes. He writes fan fiction, he's in love with him, it's adorable. And I don't want to say too much, but there is a huge queer group of friends at the center of it. There is loads of like in-depth discussions about idolizing people, and it's just a fun read, and the main character in this book is one of my favorite characters I've ever read. He is an absolute disaster, and I love him to pieces. Next up, a book I read recently is Between Perfect and Real by Ray Stovey, and this is a really fun and interesting story about a trans main character. This follows Dean, who is trans but not out and not really come to terms with it yet. They're not really sure, and they get cast as Romeo in their school's play of Romeo as like a gender non-conforming, you know, a bit out there, exciting casting. And through playing this character, they realise that actually they definitely are trans. They need to be open about it, but the most intimidating part of this for them is to tell their lesbian girlfriend, who also believes them to be lesbian. So definitely an interesting one. It was a really fun read, so much about like coming to terms with things and finding your people and finding a queer community and how different people react to news and how that impacts you. It was just a really, really good read, and if you're a theatre geek like me, you'll probably really enjoy it. Next is Beneath the Sugar Sky by Shauna Maguire. This is technically book 3 in the Wayward Children series. Every book in this series is queer in a different way, and you could probably start at this point in the series. I would recommend you read book 1 first, but they're very, very short, so I feel okay recommending book 3, and the colours were just too perfect to not put up here. And to give an overview of this series, the Wayward Children series follows basically children who have gone through magical doors to magical worlds and had to come back home. So picture Alice in Wonderland and Narnia and things like that. But when they come back home, they have to come to terms with the fact they've lost their perfect world. But there's this school called Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, and she takes in these children and helps them come to terms with this and potentially even find their doors again. And it's a gorgeous series. Every single one of these books is amazing, but book 3 fits this colour scheme perfectly. Next is The Gravity of Us by Phil Stamper. This is another YA male-male contemporary story, again set slightly in the future, and it follows our main character who is like a social media influencer and living in New York, and all of a sudden has to move to Florida, I think. maybe Texas, something like that, because his dad has got chosen for a mission to go to Mars and he's not allowed to do any of his social media, and like his life is completely changed and there's loads of sacrifices, and there's also a very cute male-male romance. So definitely a really fun read. And then my final one for this is, again, All the Invisible Things by Orla Collins. The arc of this book had like ultimate bi flag vibes to it, so just gonna mention it. And that's another thing I'd say for all of these, is if there is a book where the cover you own doesn't match, but a cover you've seen does match, take it, use it, make the most of it. Next up for the Pansexual Pride Flag, I do have two for this one. The first being The Mirror Season by Anna-Marie McLemore. I am also pretty confident this one does have pansexual rep in it, so fantastic. And Anna-Marie McLemore has spoken frequently about the fact that this book looks very pan and is very pan, so it seems like a very good fit to me. And this follows two teens who I think have both been victims of sexual assault, and it's their dealing with this and healing from trauma, and I think it's going to be a really hard-hitting story. I've not read it yet, but I'm very excited to, and I've just heard phenomenal things about it so far, and saying it's really impactful and a really hard read, but really worth reading, so I'm excited to give it a go. And then my other rec for this one is possibly a bit of a stretch, but I had to find a way to rec this book in this video, and that is The House in Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. It has the bluey, pinky, yellowy vibes, it's about right. This is a fantastic adult kind of fantasy story, and it follows Linus, who works at like the Bureau for Protecting Magical Children or whatever it is, and he is basically a caseworker and has to go to orphanages to assess that they are keeping children safe, and he gets sent to this orphanage to do this, where he meets Arthur Panassis and a whole group of children, and it is the most wholesome, adorable, beautiful, hard-hitting thing I've ever read in my life. Like, you'll smile the whole way through, but it also covers some fantastically important storylines, so I couldn't recommend it more highly. Next, we're moving on to the Trans Pride Flag, and the first book I would recommend for this is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir written by George M. Johnson, and the audiobook is also narrated by him, which I would highly recommend. And it's all about growing up Black and queer in America and what that is like for him, and this is a beautifully honest story and finding out about his life and everything he's been through, and it's utterly beautiful. I cried so many times whilst listening to this book. It was absolutely gorgeous, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And then the other one I have for this, which I've also not actually read yet, is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. You can see again, the blue pink, it kind of works. This, I think, is sapphic as far as I know, and I don't actually know anything about it apart from the fact it's won awards and everyone loves it, and Nina LaCour is a lot of people's like favourite author. So, although I've not read it myself yet, I feel like I can pretty confidently recommend this as a very good LGBT book to read. And again, if you're reading it for the readathon, it's very short, so it could work well for that. Next up, we have the Genderqueer Flag, which I was really trying to find more books for, but I'm not gonna lie, finding green and purple on the same cover was not as easy as I anticipated. So I have just found the one, and that is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is a male or Achillean sci-fi story, which is always quoted as being red, white, and royal blue mixed with ancillary justice. I don't know too much about this, but I know there's an arranged marriage. I know it's kind of like enemies to lovers. I know there's a lot of tension. I think there's quite a lot of moments where these two people, because it was an arranged marriage, evidently both like each other but haven't actually figured it out yet. Neither of them admit it. And apparently it's just quite hard-hitting but absolutely gorgeous, and everyone's loving it, and I can't wait to read it, so I would highly recommend you give this one a go. Next up for the Nonbinary Flag, I do have two recommendations, but starting off I'm going to do I Wish You All the Best by Mason Diva, which I think is a very good rec for this because both the author and the main character are non-binary. But this is a really gorgeous story following Ben, who comes out to their family as non-binary, and as a result of this is kicked out of their home. And they end up living with their sister and having to join a new school, and then they meet a guy, and it sounds cute as hell. I loved this book when I read it. It was a fantastic read. Again, very hard-hitting, but utterly beautiful. I loved every second of reading it, so I would highly, highly recommend it, and it matches the flag really well. And then the next one I'd recommend is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I've not read this one yet, but it's like a YA speculative story about monsters, and it follows the main character, Jam, who has grown up all her life with this lesson that there's like monsters in the city, and then they meet Pet, a creature made of horns and colours and claws who emerges from one of their mother's paintings and a drop of Jam's blood. No idea, but it sounds really interesting. I've heard amazing things about this. Akwaeke Emezi is a awarded author, so I'm sure it's a really good book. And again, it fits the colour scheme pretty well. And then moving on, next we're going to be doing the Lesbian Flag, and for this I do have three, the first of which is the Falling in Love montage by Kiara Smith. This is a lesbian romance. I've not actually read it yet. I started it and then ended up putting it down just due to not reading it at the right time. But I know this is a book that is truly loved by people like Katie from Brightness Katie Reads and Teresa at Sappho's Library. I'll link both of them down below, especially if you're looking for more lesbian recs, please go over to Teresa's channel. And yeah, it's meant to be really good, fun, YA, summery, contemporary, and the colour scheme was spot on. Next up, a book that's not actually out yet, but does come out on the 1st of June, is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Not a perfect colour match, but I felt like it was pink and purple enough to count, even though purple's not really on the flag. It was close enough and I want to recommend it to people. So this is a fantastic story following August, who's a massive pessimist, doesn't believe in love, doesn't believe in anything, and moves out to New York and lives with this group of friends and suddenly has like a really close family, kind of found family vibe, and then meets a girl on the subway and, you know, maybe she does believe in love after all, until it turns out this girl is literally trapped on the subway, having been there since like the 70s. It's very interesting. There's time travel and sci-fi bits and it's just fantastic and beautiful and I loved it, so please read it. And then the other one I'll recommend is Bruised by Tanya Bottajou, and this is another sapphic one, and I don't know much about it, but I know it's about a girl, I think, who's mourning her parents who died in an accident, and she finds a way to kind of heal from this and help herself through it in roller derby with a group of amazing women, I would assume, as that tends to be the main demographic of roller derby. So sapphic, badass roller derby people. Sounds pretty good to me. Next up, we are going to do two flags together again because they have very similar colour schemes, and that is the Asexual and Demisexual flag with the kind of purple vibes, and we've got quite a few here. The first being Not Your Villain by C.B. Lee. This is the third book in a series, but it is a fantastic series written by an Asian American author who is bisexual, and I think all of the characters in this books, in like every book, are queer. You center a different character in each book. I think the character in this one could actually be Ace, but I may be wrong on that, so don't necessarily take my word on it, I'm sorry. But this is a really fun, like, YA superhero story, slightly dystopian America, where something has happened and you can get these superhero powers and you're tested when you get them to see what grade you're at, and you may have to like go into training or you're allowed to just live your life, and it's really interesting, and there's lots of, you know, corruption and good heroes, bad heroes. It's good fun. I loved the first book. I've not read the other two yet, but I'm very excited to give them a go. Next up is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is, again, really fantastic. This is an adult sci-fi, it is sapphic, and it follows this world where we have found lots of other worlds that exist, parallel universes, but you can only travel to another one of these worlds if you do not exist on it. So our main character is extremely valuable because she is dead in all but 8 of the like 400 worlds they have found, so she can travel a lot. But there's lots of really good social commentary on that, of why is she dead in lots of these worlds? Is it due to her race and her upbringing and socioeconomic status that she is less likely to have survived to her 20s in these worlds? And yeah, fantastic, really interesting, really, really good book. And quite short as well, especially for a sci-fi. Next up is Loveless by Alice Oseman, and this does actually feature an Arrow Ace main character and is written by an Arrow Ace author, so fits very well for these flags. Sorry if the angle's changed, my camera overheated and turned off, but we're back. So this is a story following Georgia, who is going off to university for the first time, and she feels like she's in love with the idea of love, but she's never had a boyfriend. The one time she's had like an interaction with someone in that way, it didn't go well, and she had a really bad time with it, and she just doesn't really know what is what. And it's her coming to terms with her sexuality and being Arrow and Ace and learning a lot more about the LGBT community, and there's loads of LGBT characters in this. I personally really enjoyed the bisexual or slash pansexual rep in one of the side characters. I just really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really fun read and a really good depiction of university life in the UK. Next up is a book which I feel like no one's really heard of because it came out quite a long time ago, which is Ultraviolet by R.J. Anderson. I believe this also features Ace Rep, but I may be wrong. I read this so many years ago and I don't really remember it. I just remember that I enjoyed it. But this follows a main character who has been sectioned in a mental institute after killing a girl at her school. I think there's like some sci-fi speculative elements. As I said, I really can't remember what happens because I did read it when I was about 12, but it was really good when I read it, so I'd recommend you giving it a go if you're interested and you want to read a really backlist YA book. And then finally, one I should know the synopsis of, but definitely don't, and that is The Colour Purple. This is definitely sapphic, and I don't know much about it, but I feel like everyone watching it probably knows more than me anyway. It's a classic, everyone loves it. It's very purple, it works. And then again, doing two flags together because the colour schemes are very similar. We're doing Aromantic and Agender, and I do have two recs here. One is Not Your Villain by C.B. Lee, which I realised I may have said for the previous one, which was Not Your Backup. If I got this wrong, sorry. But this is the second book in that same series, so I won't get the synopsis again, but it's really good fun, and it's the second book. So if you wanted to read two for this readathon, read book 1, 2, and 3, and then two of them look like pride flags. Why not? But again, YA superheroes, it's very queer. You'd love it. And then the other one I'll recommend is Saga Volume 7. I would actually recommend looking at all the Saga volumes. I wouldn't be surprised if for a lot of graphic novels that different volumes have really good covers. But I read Saga Volume 7 recently and it just smacked me in the face with how similar it looks to this pride flag, so I had to recommend it. Yes, it's Volume 7, I realise that's very unhelpful, but it's a fantastic series and it's graphic novels, so maybe you can just read that many. But to quickly explain, this is a graphic novel series following a guy and a girl from different races on different planets. These two planets are at war with each other, but these two people have fallen in love, gotten married, and had a child. Meaning they have kind of betrayed both their races, or at least that's how their races are viewing it. So it's really interesting. It's not necessarily queer in that there's not even really many human characters, but there's interracial relationships, there's definitely, it's got queer vibes if nothing else. I don't know if there's like officially, oh no, there definitely is, there's trans rep by Volume 7, so yes, it's definitely queer. It's fantastic. Adult, sci-fi, really like quite graphic, so be warned, but it's really good. Okay, coming to the end, we've only got a couple of flags that I'm going to do left. There are definitely more pride flags than this, but I just thought I would find some books for some of them and do what I could. So next we're going to do the Polyamory Flag, and I would recommend Ace of Spades for this. This is, I think, coming out very soon and is a like YA dark academia story with like POC main characters, which is something that's massively underrepresented in dark academia, unfortunately. And I've been hearing amazing things about it. I don't know if it's going to be out by June. If it's not, I'm really sorry, but the covers matched so well, I had to say it, and it's been getting rave reviews, so I guess it's just a book to be looking out for in the near future when it does come out. And then finally, the Intersex Flag. I couldn't find a book with this much yellow and purple on it, but this is another example of where you can just kind of slightly stretch the rules. I'm going to recommend I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson, because it's yellow and has a circle on it, so we see the similarity, right? Anyway, I love this book. This is a fantastic YA contemporary story following two twins who have lost their mother, and it's really interesting because you're splitting seeing them when they're like 15 or 13 and when they're like 18, but the way this is done is you follow one of the twins' point of view when they're older and the other when they're younger, so you only kind of see each of them at that age. And it's really interesting, and the brother is gay and there is a male-male relationship in it, and it's just a beautiful, hard-hitting story about grief, so I would highly recommend it. But anyway, I think that is all of the books I have to recommend in this one. I hope you can find some good examples in this, or at the very least kind of get a feel for what you can get away with for this prompt. The answer is basically anything. If it's vaguely the right colour, feel free to count it. I had a lot of fun putting this list together though, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it, comment down below, are you going to read any of these books? Do you have any other recommendations for books with corresponding pride flags? I would love to see more recommendations down in the comments. But thank you so much for watching, subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. Link down below are links to all of my social media, as well as read-alongs and readathons I host, including Whateverthon, which is happening in June, and my Patreon and wishlist if you want to check out any of that. But that is it for this video, so bye, and I'll see you in the next one.